So the job report is out. The numbers are as bleak as I think you would probably suspect. This is Politico. The unemployment rate shot up 14.7% in April, and the highest level since the Great Depression, Bureau of Statistics reported Friday. U.S. employers shed 20.5 million jobs in April as small businesses struggled to access hundreds of billions that Congress appropriated in an attempt to stem the layoffs. Now, Nancy Pelosi and the top echelon of Democrats are opening that small business packages to lobbyists. To give you some scale on this, this is the bottom at 2008, that recession. This is where we are now. Again, numbers we haven't seen since the Great Depression. Around the same time, because we knew these numbers were going to be pretty dire, pretty drastic, we have a Democratic Party who gave Republicans everything they wanted in 4 bills. $1,200 to the population itself. Now, the Democratic Party is saying, now, let's do this big Roosevelt plan. Now, the Roosevelt plan that these guys are talking about, that they've been teasing, is coming out at the same time where Mitch McConnell has basically said, Republicans got everything they want. We don't need anything else. It is now time that we start focusing on the debt. The deficit is too high. They decide to come out with a plan, Rooseveltian in scale, at the exact same time that the Republican Party has basically said, we're gone to lunch. Now, that's politics. The politics is that at some point, their public can see them fighting against the Republican Party for this plan that in no way ever, under no circumstances, would ever get passed. The $2,000 and whatnot that Bernie Sanders and some of these other, I think Kamala Harris and these guys are talking about. The rub is, if that was ever going to pass, if you were really interested in what the public needed, because these job losses were already understood to be happening, we already knew it was going to get to be this bad. If, indeed, that was something they actually and genuinely cared about, they wouldn't have waited until 4 packages out to finally say, oh, by the way, as an afterthought, let's now get to the constituents that are in dire straits, as opposed to the corporations and companies that didn't need the money. Many of them shouldn't have gotten that money. But you didn't do that. The point that, don't you want your Democrats to be more than just placeholders? Especially in a situation where we have job losses that reached the level of the Great Depression. We need a new left. And my argument is the way for that new left to actually accumulate, to develop power, develop credibility, is to walk. Not just walk, but walk and stand beside me on this notion. We represent policy, and to be very clear on what that is. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal patron. I'm going to keep this quick. At least I'm going to try to keep this quick. Are you not sick and tired of your Democrats just being placeholders? For the last 40 years, you have lumped in and voted for any random Democrat that they put up. Blue no matter who, blue no matter who. Elections, yes, can be important. Elections have consequences. By the same token, there are things that are around elections. I mean, the fact that an election takes place doesn't necessarily mean the election is the only thing in existence taking place at that very specific time. That election has consequences that go beyond just that particular individual winning or losing the race. It also goes to what you, as a party, is willing to accept as a standard. For you to be a Democrat, what does that stand for? When they kept asking before, no one had an answer to that question. And I think that's something important. If somebody is running on this notion of cutting Social Security or privatizing Social Security, do you vote for that person? Is there a standard where you say, well, yeah, that's too far? Or because that person is running against Ted Cruz, you go ahead and vote for that person knowing he's going to cut Social Security under this notion of narrow focus pragmatism. Okay, the guy's going to cut Social Security, but Ted Cruz is a monster. Understand what you're saying when you're doing that. Is it not true that standards matter more? Meaning the fact that you can set a stake in the ground and say, you know what, I'm not willing to go beyond this point. Because if I go beyond this point, from here on out, there are going to be people who are basically going to be worse than this very particular point that I am no longer unwilling to go. If you are on the left, the objective, you are not going to get your policy ideas through the Democratic Party. You have taken the same tack of voting for any random hat for the last 40 years. And when you do that, you basically give over all of your power to get any of those things accomplished. I understand this notion of narrow focus pragmatism, but elections can't be looked at in the context of one singular election. It has to be looked at over the course of time. And if you can see a situation where there is a momentum going in a particular direction, in our case, to the right, then you've screwed up. This issue of accountability, this issue of standards have basically gone out the window with this continuous focus on the two candidates, missing the point that there should be some level of integrity to what a party is and some standards by which the party is not necessarily willing to go, where you have an aspect, meaning the left, being willing to let them lose if they are willing to trespass on what you consider and hold somewhat sacred. And if there is nothing you hold sacred, then I suppose it doesn't really matter about accountability, right? Look at where you are. You went from FDR to John F. Kennedy to Joe Biden. And before that, you had a person who was basically a right-winger, Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden can barely get out a coherent statement. Joe Biden is now being accused of sexual assault, with about 40% of the Democratic Party believing he's a rapist. I'm making the point to you that that slide to the right like that, you've had money pushing on your candidates without any notion of accountability because you were always willing to vote blue no matter who. If you're part of the left, and I'm calling it new left, and what I define new left to be, nothing radical. Do you agree with Medicare for all, meaning everybody should have health care? Do you agree with getting rid of student debt? Do you agree with expanding Social Security? Do you agree with at least a $15 an hour minimum wage? And do you agree with radical transformation of our electoral system? None of those things are radical. All of those things are popular, even outside of just Democrats and lefties. I don't care whether you're a socialist. I don't care whether you're a communist. I don't care whether you're a right-winger. I don't care what you are. Your party affiliation, your idea of yourself, none of that stuff is real in absolute terms. They're just thought forms. I'm talking about things that are concrete. And I call these things the new left. When they say, what do you mean by new left? Policy. That's what we are. Policy. That's all we are. Well, wait a minute. What do you mean that's all you are? These policies are all we are. Are you a party? Nope. We're just policy. And we stand here and we stay unmoved as a group until a party or somebody picks up our particular policy platform. And in taking that particular platform, they get our support. If you do this to the tune of tens, millions, 15 million, you will get what you want in the political space. The catch here is by giving over all of your power, it's like the black vote issue. African Americans always complain about the Democratic Party always taking them for granted, missing the point that if you're voting to the tune of 90%, they don't have to give you anything because you're voting for things based out of fear as opposed to voting for an affirmative case for something. I'm putting this person in not because of what I get out of this person, but entirely because this person keeps the monsters at bay. If you're willing to do that, then they don't have to give you anything because you've already given them everything. I'm saying the same thing is true for the left in the way that they've done politics for the last 40 years. You've habituated your behavior into behaving this way. But in doing so, you've incentivized your own being taken advantage of. Whether the Democratic Party wins or loses is secondary to whether or not you're willing to maintain your integrity in regards to these are the policies we want. You're separate and distinct from that party. And let's be very clear. Yes, you should be willing to let them lose in order to define your particular standard. The fact is, Joe Biden is probably going to lose anyway. And whether Joe Biden wins or loses, I would argue him winning is the worst thing in the world for the left. But beyond that point, understand what happened in 2020. Every Democrat on that stage was willing to lose to Trump if it meant stopping you understand when they said, are you willing to go to a brokered convention and rip it out of Sanders' cold, bloody hands? Each and every one of them said, yes. Do you honestly believe that any of them are not unaware that no Bernie supporter would vote for them if they did that? But again, that didn't matter. It was more important to stopping Sanders because Sanders would have changed the party for a generation, not necessarily just an election cycle. You, in that situation, that political space will never acquiesce to your wants. If they're willing to go that far in order to stop your candidate and your idea set, then you'll never get anything accomplished in a system like that. And I would argue you've been digging this ditch, trying to get to China for the last 40 years, and you haven't got there yet. My particular point of view is to stand outside of the political space, and if you stand with me to the tune of millions under the policy set, Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, elimination of student debt, $15 an hour minimum wage, radical transformation of the electoral system. Again, nothing radical. Don't care about your party affiliations. Don't care about any of that stuff. Stand here with me outside of the party. Stop considering yourself a Democrat and let them win or lose on their own merits. Now, we, in this situation, vote or not, depending upon whether or not they accept our policy objectives. The question becomes, is the Democratic Party so fixated on not changing, not accepting what the public want, not accepting what the majority, for that matter, of the American public wants in regards to policy, particularly when we're talking about Democrats, so stuck on not changing and working in the best interests of their donors that they are willing to lose to Trump rather than accept concessions. Again, concessions that are favored by the majority of the population. If that's true, then that's pretty disturbing. But that does seem to be the way they're going. If the Democratic Party loses because of not accepting concessions, and they come to you after and said, you made us lose, you say, God damn right. And we will continue to do so until you accept what the American public wants. You will not get another election until you accept what the American public wants. And you stay there. The catch here is movements, especially when it's outside of the party, has leverage and latitude to function in the best interest of those policy objectives. The only thing that matters from our standpoint, everything else is subordinate, including the parties, is the policy objectives and getting those things implemented into law. That is where we need to be from the standpoint of the left. That is the path after Sanders, not in the political space. If we need to divert our energies into the political space in order to get this person or that person elected, fair enough, but all of those things are entirely dependent upon how we get our policies accomplished. Everything else is subordinate, including whether or not the Democratic Party, or for that matter, the Republican Party, wins or loses. That is the pathway for the left from here on out. If you're with me on that, if you believe in those policies, if you believe that you want those policies espoused into law, I would put to you that the only way to do it is the way I am saying it. Anything else gets gobbled up, changed, blocked, and everything else. Our influence is best served outside of the political space where we can be the kingmaker one way or the other in regards to who gets elected, who doesn't, and the standard that needs to be set in any political party that we are going to be associated with. Like, share, subscribe. Rosie Mike, dude, that AOC video is crazy. I can't believe she said that. That is kind of wild. Marcus Will said progressive fanning shock about what AOC said. I don't think he's fanning shock. I mean, I gotta be honest, it is shocking what she said. All right, I'm gonna end this here. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.